Imagine drawing one curve and getting a film-ready railway with a fully animated train in minutes. That is the 3D Tutor train and rail generator for Blender. It is a fully built for flexibility. Drop in any locomotive, add as many cards as you like, and customize each one length, spacing, offsets, scale, and even direction individually. Your train, your story, zero friction. Need a seamless loop for motion graphics, backgrounds, or promos? Set the route, press play, and enjoy the perfectly repeatable animation. Prefer station stops and story beats? Switch to manual control and time everything to a frame. Spend your time on shots, lighting, and story rather than wrestling with paths and constraints. This generator was created by Josh, the artist behind our Tentacle Monster generator, brilliant for airy underwater sequences and striking sci-fi environments. If you know that tool, you already know the level of polish to expect here. Whether you're previewing a route for a director, dressing an environment kit, or creating a stylized cinematics, this generator gets your trains to look amazing with little to no effort. The next part of the video is a deep dive covering all controls and uses as well as problem solving for the geometry node. When you open up the Blender file, you will find yourself the train track examples as well as a preview scene of the setup. So let's go into what it includes. And it also has a sample train as well as sample objects for this geometry node combination. So let's go right into it. Firstly, you'll find the examples on the left hand side. If we go onto the material mode, you'll notice a couple of different setups. So this one is more of a modern train track. This one is more of a wooden type of a setup. If you want to make use out of this entire setup, my recommendation would be to simply grab a train and the track and use Ctrl+C as well as Ctrl+V to make a duplicate into any other Blender file project. You can simply transfer the items from one project to another. So how do we use this track? Well, we could make a duplicate out of the already existing track like so, using Shift-D and then GY, move it off to the side. This geometry node pack includes two geometry nodes, one for the train and another one for the track itself. So let's go and cover over the train track itself first. If we were to go to onto modifiers tab, we'll notice that we have some options. First things first is that we are using a custom profile object. This allows us to control the shape of the track. By default, it looks like this. If we were to go ahead and use different profile, a profile 1, we can change the track shape. And if you want to customize it even further, you can go ahead and create a custom shape. So these are the type of train tracks that are being used. If you want, you can either make a duplicate out of this shape or you can create your own one. These are simple Bezier curves, meaning that you can make, for example, something like this of a train track like so. And you can just make sure that you know the profile name. So this one is the name of profile 02.002 to the one that we just created, and it's going to give us that exact shape. Now you'll notice that it might not have enough resolution, and the reason for that is that you do need to increase if you want to more of a resolution for this setup. So that option is going to be underneath the rail tab over here. There is a profile resolution. If you were to increase this, you're going to get more of a resolution out of this parameter over here. So if I was to increase it to a more reasonable amount, you're going to get more of a detailed type of shape that you created the profile out of. And we also have option for a clamp object. So we have a preset for clamp object for more of a wood clamping. So these ones over here. We also have a clamp for a concrete type of setting like so. And then we have the option to change up the railing as well. So right now it's being used wood type of a setup like so, which is looking very nice. But if you want to change it from wood, you can simply search for concrete, planks concrete, and change it up to concrete. Although you'll notice that this does not look like concrete at all. Well, with each one of those free objects, you also have a customizable material to use, and you can create your own custom one, or you can simply use the preset. So for example, over here, if I was to change this to a plank material concrete, you're going to get yourself a concrete type of support. And next up, we have an option for Bezier poly. So the way we can use this railing is, if we were to go onto edit mode, we can change up the curvature of the setup. So by simply grabbing this point in the middle, I can move this around and change the overall shape. And we can even change it to click GZ and move it upwards like so to have some bit of an extra elevation, although you need to be a little bit more careful when it comes to that, especially if you're using a Bezier curve. Bezier curve allows us to control the interpolation like so and move the curvature interpolation using the points provided from the main section of the point. So by using this, we can basically create our own type of different combinations of the setup for the railing. But when it comes to elevation, it's not as well set up. So I do recommend using mainly the Bezier from a more of a flatter type of a surface, and that allows us to, well, create some more unique type of shape. You can also go ahead and use subdivision and create more detail out of the overall shape like so. Or if you want more of an elevation, you can use a poly version of the curve. If we were to enable this, you'll notice that it's a different train track now. And the reason being is that these interpolations are not going to affect the train track anymore. We are using now fillet count and radius. So using radius, we can now go ahead and change up the interaction between the points and the interception of them. Like so, we can also increase the fillet count. So this is going to be like a resolution for these curvatures. And by just playing around a little bit with them, you can get some real nice type of train tracks with some lovely elevation, like so. Although I would recommend not overusing the corners, because when you're placing an animated train, they might not go quite as well with these corners. So I do recommend you to have a little bit of nicer corners, more rounded off. Now, going back to the setup, we have a tab for rail separation. So this will allow us to, well, separate the railings in between. We can use this to make this wider and thinner, depending on the train, for example, train wheels and the way we set up. We also have flip normal, so this will basically allow us to have the orientation properly set up. In case this is flipped, we can just unflip it like so. Then we have a profile resolution. So this is, we already talked about it. It's going to allow us to get a more of a shape, a detailed shape out of the setup. I recommend you not overdoing it, but if you want more detailed version, you are free to increase this to get a nicer shape out of this. A radius will allow us to control basically the radius, the thickness of these railings. And we also have resolution, which if I were to go onto the wireframe, we'll see that this is increasing the overall resolution of our railing, just like that. So if we have more curves, more steeper curves, for example, by increasing this, we're basically telling we're going to have less edge loops in between. And so we can see more of an angle, but by lowering this, we're going to get a really nice, smooth type of a curvature. Next up, we have custom profile. If we wanted to have this turned off to make it as basic of a rail as possible, to have it more optimized, we are able to do so. We're able to also use smooth auto angle to basically control this angle over here. So we can lower this to a value close to 0, and we're going to get more of a squarish result for more retro design. Next up, we have plank instances. So this will control the spawnable plank supports underneath. We're able to use a plank scale XYZ to control how much we stretch it out. If we want them to be thicker, thinner, and whatnot, we're able to do that. We also have option for plank offset. So if we want them to be perfectly aligned with the train track, we're able to use XYZ to slightly tweak these around to get them placed right underneath the track. So depending on the profile you're using, you might need to adjust that. Next up, we have random rotation. So this is going to allow us to make a more organic type of a look. If we want to make it look more abandoned, we are able to do so. We are able to like offset the Z direction rotation of these tracks. And next up, we have plank count. So it basically tells us how often the planks need to be spawned. So if we increase this value, it's going to be spawning very rarely. If we lower this, we are able to spawn them quite close together. Then we have a debugging option for preview rotation. So if we want to see which way the normals are facing for a curvature, we're able to use this to see the arrows on the side, which are facing upwards, which are facing downwards. Using this, we're able to better, distinguish the type of debugging that we're having. So for example, when I'm elevating this, we can see that these are rotating, meaning that the track supports might look off when they're in this direction. So you might want to slightly tweak this around a little bit to make sure you're getting it just right. Because it's procedurally generated item, you might need to tweak a little bit with, the placement of the setup to make sure you're getting all the options just right. Next up, we have the option to deleting random planks and its seeds. So if I was to start using it, we can have more of, scattered around planks, and we can just use the randomizer to play around with the options to get maybe more of an abandoned type of a look. Next up, we have options for the clamps. So these are the clamps that are going to be intersectable between these wooden planks and the metal railings. We're able to change up their scale, X, Y, Z option to make sure that it's set properly. We have also rotation options, again, to better suit the overall setting. And finally, we have offset. So this offset will allow us to, control the mirrored version of each other. So we're able to push it a little bit to the right, to the left, like so, up and down if we want to, again, to make sure that they're perfectly sitting with one another. And finally, we have the options for separation. So if we want them to be offset a little bit more from each other to better fit the width of these railing separation, we are able to use this for the clamps as well. And of course, we have option for randomization as well to make sure that the randomization is slightly set to make it more look like a hand-built type of railing. So once we are done with the railway itself, we're then able to place our train. There are multiple ways of doing it, but the fastest way would be to simply make a duplicate out of this already existing rail curvature. So we're going to hit Shift D to make a duplicate. We're going to hit Escape, and then we're going to go on to Modifiers tab and change this from train tracks to a train generator. The reason we're doing this is simply because we want to make sure that the curvature that the train is using is also fitting with the curvature of the track. So it's going to follow exactly the same type of animation as the placement of the train tracks. Next up, you might notice that this train is a little bit too big. We might need to adjust this based on the size of the train track. So within the parameters of the train generator, you are able to lower the scale down to a value that's going to be more fitting for this track. And I do recommend you at the very start to use show curve just to make sure that we are able to see this little line over here. That's going to help us see the position of the track, how it's going to follow the track itself. When you are adjusting the track itself, let's say you want to adjust the animation position of the track, when you hit play, you can see the train now is moving, although it's slightly offset. We're going to fix that in a moment. Before that though, if you want to adjust overall animation, you're going to go ahead and just select the train itself and the track underneath it. Then go to edit mode, hitting tab, and then you're going to be able to, select both of these curvatures because you had them both selected. Then you can just click GY, for example, and move it off to the side. And that way you are controlling the offset, not of just the train track, but also of the train itself. Because otherwise, if you just control the train track only, you'll notice that now the train track is going off from the train itself and the train is just flying off to the distance. So just make sure you control them both at the same time. So going back to the train itself, what else do we have? Well, we have an option for separation. Depending on the mesh, you need to slightly adjust this to make sure that the train mesh, all the items are nicely separated. So separation is going to help you do that. It's going to give you a basic separation, default separation of all the meshes. I'm going to show you how to adjust manually all of them in a moment though. But before doing that, let me talk a little bit about, well, the option for poly Bezier. This is an option required for the setup. If you have poly enabled over here, you'll need to enable poly on the train as well and make sure that the poly fillet radius and fillet radius also matches the same type of count as here. So for the track, right now it's 32 and 5.96. If I was to set it up as 32 and 5.96, we're going to get exactly the same type of a setup. But if you are using a Bezier on both of them, then that's not going to be an issue. And it's going to be following that same type of setup because it's going to be using the interpolation of the curvature. So next up, what do we have? Well, we have a time multiplier. Right now, we want this first train to be going in other direction. If you want to do that, you can just simply put a negative value on the time multiplier, and it's going to now be going onto the other side. But before we get into the rest of the parameters for the geometry node, I'd like us to go into the geometry node itself, into the graph. The reason we're doing that is because this will give us more control over the train itself. So if I was to quickly show what's inside of it, we have this entire graph over here. And all we need to know is that we don't need to overcomplicate it. We simply need to know that each one of these groups represent the train cart, and we can control how many train carts we have and the position of each one of them in the setup. Before I show you how to switch them around though, I'd like us to flip the train itself. Right now it's going in the other direction. All the train are flipped. So we can just go ahead and click on these icons over here to switch direction. Once we switch all this direction, it's going to basically be facing the right way now, like so. Again, this all depends on the mesh. Then next up, we have an option for separate adjustment. So on the very right side, we're going to have our main front of the train, and each one of them, then each one of the groups as we go more to the left, are going to represent different cart wagon. We can change these meshes using these object items over here. So by simply click on it, we can select this to be, for example, wagon, and now the entire train is just going to be set out of wagons. So you can make use out of a custom train mesh that you'd like. Next up, we have the option for separation adjustment. So these will control the options for how separate it is from individual items. These are set so every group will control the offset slightly to the ones on the right. So right now, the one on the front is not going to do anything, but as we go back, this one is going to control everything to the right. So we can adjust the item that's at the very front, like so. Let me just straighten up this train, like so. And by adjusting this, we can have the wagon at front to have a proper gap. Next up, we have, for example, this one over here. So this one will adjust everything to the right, including the wagon and the train. So we can use this to have a better separation, like so. And if we control this, we can have more of a gap over here, and so forth and so forth. So my recommendation is to adjust the separation, the main separation, within the parameter value itself. Once you're happy with it, you can use the separation adjustment within the geometry node graph to get the right parameters. So this one, for example, everything here might be to our likings. All right, now that we're done with the separation and we have the right direction, we also have a couple of controls for translation and scale manual. So translation will allow us to basically offset the origin points of the mesh. So I'm able to basically say that maybe this wagon needs to be more to the right, let's say. Maybe it needs to be higher up a little bit, so it would be slightly touching the railing itself with the positioning, lovely like so. All of these can be set up with translation. We also have scale manual. So if, let's say, we want slight little tweak with the position of the wheels, for example, these wheels are a little bit, the train track is a little bit too narrow, for example, we can use this as an alternative to, well, squish the train a little bit. So just a little bit in a way that's not too much, we can do so, and it squishes the entire train. But if we want small adjustments like that, we are able to do so. Well, alternatively, we can just simply change up the rail separation over here to better fit in this value, like so. And we're going to get ourselves a perfect setup. What do we do if we want to have, let's say, less wagons? Well, all we gotta do is just simply delete the ones that we don't want. So we can, for example, delete the second to last version over here. I can go ahead and click delete, and you'll notice that the entire train disappears. What we need to do is we need to reconnect all of the setups that we see it over like this. So curvature will go to the input, instances will go to instances, move to move, scale, separation to scale, separation to separation, and scale to scale. And it's quite easy actually to do. All we need to do is just hold Alt, and using the right mouse button, we're going to drag our right mouse button from one group to another. And we're going to do this multiple times until it gets all of its items just like that. And then we're going to finalize it with getting the curve into the input. And like so, we're getting basically one less of a wagon. If we want to add additional type of wagons, we are able to do so. We just simply need to make a little bit of an extra space like so. Let's say we want to have a third item to be also train main. I can just simply make a duplicate out of this and put it in here like so. By just dragging and dropping, it's going to already attach it to the curve like that. And then I'm going to hold Control, just delete these attachments like this, and hold Alt and just reattach it over like so in this section. Now let's do it on the other side as well, just like that. And now we have ourselves the train main part in the middle of in between the wagons. And if we want, we can either, use the translation, for example, to offset it a little bit. We can also squish it a little bit like so. And that way we have a little bit of a setup where we have, well, full customization of what exactly we want in our train chain. Finally, at the very end, we have ourselves a smoke simulation. So this is a smoke particle system. It's going to be attached directly to the main front section of the item. I'm going to go ahead and change the train part that's in the middle with the wagon because it looks a little bit off to me. There we go. So the way the smoke works is all the options are going to be within the geometry node parameter itself. So we have a customizable plane that we can set up ourselves with the smoke. If I was to hit play, we can see the smoke coming out. And you might notice that for starters, it looks a little bit off. Well, first of all, let me just go ahead and lower down the speed of the train because I think it was a little bit too fast. There we go. So now the smoke is coming from this end. We have option for spawn offset. If I was to go into the mesh preview, I can go ahead and adjust this a little bit while it's playing. That way I know where exactly the smoke is coming from. If we pause it, we see this little square over here. We can go ahead and just slightly readjust it to be more to the front like this. And now when I hit play, it's going to hit a nice smoke little setup. Just like that. So if we have a steam setup, we are able to use it. If we don't want the smoke, all we got to do is just simply take off the plane and it's going to remove the smoke completely. One more thing I'd like to mention is that this smoke over here is set up with camera positioning, meaning that if we add ourselves a quick camera, we can select this camera as an option. So let's go ahead and do that using the pipette, for example, over here. And then we can click 0, we can click N, and we can use camera to view. That way we're able to essentially possess the camera and control the camera setup. And then you'll notice that now the smoke is always going to be facing the camera. So these smoke planes are always going to be facing it like so. We also have a couple of controls for noise, animation, and influence. So the strength and the scale, the speed, these will control basically how much offset it is. If we have this to extreme value, for example, the smoke starts going off way onto the distance. So that might be a little bit to an extreme value. Then we also have Z-force and lifetime. So Z-force will allow us to control how fast it's coming out upwards. So that's going to allow us to control the overall shape of this setting. And also lifetime, so it allows us to basically control how long this will last. If we want this to be shorter of a smoke, we're able to use this to well control the overall shape. And scale will allow us to well control the scale of this smoke. If we want to be smaller, larger, and whatnot, we're able to use it. Finally, what I'd like to talk about is the animation of the train itself. This current setup is not set up with the animation, but you can still set it up with animation for custom trains if you'd like to. And the best way to do so would be through the use of shape keys. So let's go ahead and select this train over here. You can go on to data and find yourself shape keys tab, and clicking plus will give us the base of the setup. Then clicking plus again will give us the first key. Using this first key, we can basically create an animation setup. So we can, for example, go into edit mode, select these to be going upwards. If we have some selection, we can click GZ and move them upwards if we want to. And the detail of what you want really depends up to you. And then we can use this value to basically make them move up and down like so. And if we look within the animation of our train, we'll notice that we're also moving this value over here. So meaning if we have a train going over on the side, like so, we're able to animate this moving up and down just like that. Speaking of animation, we have options for moving. So we have auto movement. We can go ahead and leave it as is, or if we have this ticked off and have it manual movement, we can use the parameter to have custom control of where it's moving. So for example, if I want, we can go to a frame 0, we can click I, we can go to 20, and then move this to -10, let's say, hit I again, whilst hovering over the move. And now we're going to be able to basically tell it to stop. We can then duplicate this frame and we can hit -20, meaning that now when we hit play, it's going to stop here a little bit. And then I forgot to hit I, so let's make sure we do that. So now we can have a little bit of a stop, and then it continues on driving with the train. Just like that. Or you can have this turned on, and if we hit now from 0, it's going to reset the values, and it's going to give us the motion based on a time multiplier. So if we want this to be faster, we can do so. It's now going to be much faster, going in around and around and around like so. So that's going to be it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and happy modeling, everyone.